Hello, School Transportation Nation. I'm Tony Corpin, publisher, president of School Transportation News, and you've made it to the STN podcast. I'm here with Mr. Ryan Gray, my illustrious co-host. Ryan, Happy New Year.
Hey, Happy New Year. Happy 2022, Tony and Transportation Nation land. Hope everyone had a great holiday, and we're right back at it. New year, school is starting back up, and conference season. We just had it. We just had 3 in a row, and we're right back at it.
I know. I feel like it's never ending. But the good news is TransFinder has decided to stay as our sponsor for all of 2022. Woohoo! Thank you, TransFinder, for supporting the podcast. We appreciate you. They are been with us since the beginning, so we're excited to have them on for another season of fun here in school transportation. Right, Ryan?
Absolutely. Well, I guess this is technically season 3, I guess, although it just kind of runs all together. But it's hard to believe that we're going on, I guess, our 3rd year of these podcasts. So want to thank all of the listeners out there, as well as, the folks that are helping underwrite this thing like TransFinder. It's really been a pleasure to meet with you guys each week and talk and bring on some great guests.
Yeah, I know. Coming off of the conferences not that long ago, right? Like Indy in October, TSD in November, and Reno in December, STN Reno. And all of them, I think it felt good having conferences and seeing people again. And now we've got the TSD conference getting back on schedule. So for those of you that were thinking, hey, when is STN going back to their normal schedule? 2022 is the year. We've got the TSD conference coming up here in March 18th through the 23rd. So we're excited to host everybody. You guys can go check out tsdconference.com. Registration is open. We have our super early bird discount to save $150, good until January 14th. So there's not tons of time, but you guys could jump on that and lock in a bigger discount if you're interested in coming to the conference in Dallas, Frisco. We'd love to see you. We just locked up a couple of keynotes. I know Dr. Steven Soroka, who has been with us before, and Dr. Soroka will talk all about kind of what's just happening out there, how to be a leader in kind of these uncertain times. Omicron, Ryan, I mean, did we think we would be through COVID? And it is still lingering, and there's spiking around the country. It's like, God, man, can we not just be over this thing? It is endless.
Well, I think, COVID's never going away. I was just reading a New York Times article as we're preparing to record this podcast, and it's talking about 6 members of President Joe Biden's transition team who were urging him to kind of take a different angle on COVID, that it's here to stay. These are all medical experts. And we've been talking about this for a while. Is it the new flu? We're getting vaccines for it, but it's seeming to be something that is going to be with us every year going forward. And there's going to be different variants, kind of like the flu. So what we're seeing is we're just seeing, Band-Aids try to be put on this thing, I think, at this point, until the vaccination needle keeps moving upward. And, we do have a large, over half of adult Americans have the vaccine now, but still that means half don't. And, we are seeing a lot of spikes in a lot of places. Atlanta, Cleveland, Milwaukee, they all went back to virtual school. Some other cities as well until about next week or so, because of so many outages. And this is affecting staff too. And we see this with the driver shortage. Certainly COVID-19 has not helped the traditional driver shortage. It's made it worse. And there's some other factors at play there as well. But I know in my daughter's school district, we just received some free at-home rapid response tests from the state. I think, Tony, I think you got some too for your daughter.
Yep, absolutely. We definitely got that email.
We have to administer the first one Sunday night so that Monday morning she could go to school, and it was negative. So it's just one of these things that I think that COVID is just proving that it's here to stay. We're learning to live with it.
Yeah, I think also, Ryan, what we're seeing too is with the testing, there's a lot more call for that. And if you go to your local pharmacy, I know there's been a lot. We went around looking for tests and they're sold out everywhere, right? Or they're rationing people. You can buy two boxes of 2 tests each, right? And you're having to send in friends and family to go pick some up, right? So it's kind of crazy from that standpoint. But, I guess a lot of the experts that I've been hearing saying it's going to burn out in 2 months. But, they thought COVID was going to burn out in 6-8 months, and it's still around for 3 years, right? So, I mean, here we are. What is really the reality on the ground? And I think, like we have been talking about on this podcast, it's endemic. And we're seeing more variants, more mutations. We were laughing before that now there's flu-rona, right? Like combining the flu and coronavirus. You could stack them on top of each other. That sounds fun, right? So at the end of the day, how does it affect school transportation, right? What's the fallout? And, we might see less ridership. I know in my daughter's class, we get those letters, those dreaded letters from school that say, there was another case at her school, but if you weren't called, you didn't get called, then she wasn't in proximity and you can go back to school the next day. And I think, again, it comes back to children's vaccinations too. If the kids are vaccinated, and my daughter is 7 years old in 2nd grade, she can go back to school, and we're kind of in that process with her right now. So here it is. This is the reality on the ground with kids all over the country. Before, kids really weren't getting infected. There really wasn't an issue. But with Omicron, I feel like more and more children that I know in our community are getting it, or families are getting it. So it's just, that seems to be the new reality going into 2022.
Yeah. And one nice thing about Omicron, I guess, is that it's not hitting people as hard. I've talked to people who have gotten it and they said, yeah, it's kind of a bad cold. And to your point about testing, as along with a lot of people over the Christmas holiday, we spent, a little sick household. We all had the cold. I came back from Reno. I had a cold. I got my daughter sick. Then she got my son sick. And then he got my wife sick. Thankfully, we didn't have the Rona. But to your point on testing, yeah, it's crazy out there. And something that I'm kind of, wondering about is black market testing. I mean, you drive by every corner and you see like little like tables like free corona testing. It's like, really? Is it free? I mean, what's the rub here? And the first test that we got, we had to drive up to Hollywood to get it because our provider offered testing in 3 places: Pasadena, East LA, and Hollywood. And we had to literally park or drive around the block, and this line snaked around the corner before we could actually get into the parking structure and get the test. And I think we were there for 2 hours, so we figured, hey, the whole family's getting it. We took all of our day to do this, and again, thankfully, it was negative. But yeah, I really think that Omicron is here to stay. We're just going to see it evolve, and with that, though, society, school transportation has to evolve.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of other things happening other than coronavirus. I know the EPA had a webinar recently talking about Joe Biden's, Build Back Better. There was that. And we've got the infrastructure bill. But there's a lot of comment going on right now about the funding for school bus around EV and low emission. And that's a big talking point. And I know our own Taylor Hannon was on that webinar listening in, Ryan. What were kind of her big takeaways that we had heard from her?
Well, a lot of it still has to be finalized. So EPA, a source there, told us last week that, nothing is finalized on that $5 billion for school bus, $2.5 billion for electric or zero emissions, and $2.5 billion for low emissions, which would be your CNG and propane and renewable diesels, biofuels. But on the webinar, Claire Miller, she's the Senior VP of Strategy, Business Development, Marketing, and Communications for a student. So, the largest school bus operator in North America, some 40,000 vehicles, they're looking at this very closely, and they've already talked about their own plans for electrification. She was pointing out that, school bus contractors are so far limited in their ability to get this grant money. Now, again, we don't see the grant money yet. The EPA still has some work to do, but it looks like that contractors are going to be unable to apply directly. They'd have to work through their school district partner. There's talk about point of sale rebates from either the school bus manufacturer or the local dealer that contractors could access. So again, we should be seeing more information on this. Basically, what EPA has been doing is they've been doing these information sessions and bringing kind of stakeholders together to discuss kind of the issues. And then we should be seeing soon something more formal.
Yeah, very interesting. And then also New York, we had some big headlines. I know we wrote a story that came out saying all school buses electric by 2035. Is that even possible? That might sound like a reach. Maybe not. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, New York City went ahead and their city council back in the fall, they already signed a bill for that, all school buses. So that's 9,500 school buses to be electric by 2035. The state of New York has 50,000. So New York City, largest school district in the nation, represents about a fifth of the school buses there. The new governor, Kathy Hochul, she had her first State of the State address last week, and she used that opportunity. Didn't talk about school buses during the actual address. It was about a 35-minute speech that she gave there to a joint assembly there up in Albany. But she did in the 260-page document that I downloaded, she did have a page there on electrification of school buses. And starting with the 2027 year, that's when new purchases will need to start being all electric or zero emissions. And there's some details there on some of that funding. Basically what's going to happen is she's going to propose some legislation. So again, a lot of the details need to be figured out. But certainly New York is jumping full in on electrifying their school buses.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because we see more and more manufacturers entering the market with EV solutions. Obviously, we had some press releases, E-Lightning Motors with a new chassis. We have BYD, who's a new entrant in the market. There's Pegasus Bus working with, Zeus electric chassis. So there's a bunch of new players that we're seeing. Another one, Optimal EV, that was exhibiting at the STN Expo. So we definitely are looking at kind of, hey, what is this next evolution of technology and what's that going to look like for the school transportation industry? So I'll be very curious, because being the tip of the spear of this is a very new place for the industry to be lately.
Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of conversation in Reno, too, about repowering to electric. So there are some providers on that. And that's looked at as maybe an easy entry for a lot of school districts. So that's repowering, taking an existing diesel bus, repowering it. Now, there are pros and cons to that. A lot of the OEMs, they've all gone the route of building it from the ground up. And there's a lot of advantages to that. But, this is still, we're talking about cost, and we're still talking about, buses that cost 2.5, 3, sometimes 4 times more than your traditional ICE vehicle, your internal combustion engine vehicle. So districts, they're struggling with that. And so this is an option. So I think that's what we're looking at, an options market that's being driven by this because it comes down to cost. But certainly, I think over the next 15, 20 years, we're going to see, a lot more electric, built from the ground up from the factory, that we're going to start going out there to school districts and contractors, especially as the prices just continue to come down in terms of batteries, and that technology improves and advances, and a lot of the charging infrastructure, working with utilities and whatnot. There's a lot of guinea pigging actually that's going on right now. You call it that, where there's a lot of school districts that got into this really didn't know what they were bargaining for. And I think it's been a learning curve for the utilities as well, working with the school district. So all of this is happening. All of this is getting figured out. It's going to take some years, I think, to really get our sea legs with this. But I think that the work being done right now, we're going to see the fruit of the labor in the next decade or two.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Some other big things happening, Ryan. I know we're probably sick of hearing about it. School bus driver shortage, right? It's real. But, how are people really implementing technology that can help? One idea for you, TransFinder's intuitive award-winning Route Finder Plus routing software. It helps you find efficiencies, consolidate routes, eliminate the number of drivers you need without any negative impact. That's because Route Finder Plus uses artificial intelligence optimization combined with your staff's institutional knowledge. Routes can be redrawn in a matter of minutes. It's minimal impact to you and your community. Let TransFinder support you in your search for drivers as well. They have a webinar on their website, which is a great resource talking about drivers. What can you do to recruit them? What are the best routes to do it? Check out transfinder.com, learn more. You can also email them at getplus@transfinder.com and make sure and write driver in the subject line, or give them a call at 800-373-3609. All right, coming up next, we have Miss Taylor Hannon talking to Jenny Robinson, Transportation General Manager for Bethlehem Area School District in Pennsylvania.
Thanks, Ryan and Tony, and Happy New Year, School Transportation Nation. It's crazy that we're in 2022 now. I mean, I feel like I think back last year and it's still 2020. So I don't know what happened, but time is certainly flying. I am wishing all of our listeners here a happy and healthy, prosperous year. It's my wedding year, so I'm extra excited, but I'm manifesting good vibes. So with that, I want to welcome our first guest of 2022 to the podcast stage, Jenny Robinson. She is the Transportation General Manager at Bethlehem Area School District in Pennsylvania. She's contracted through Transpar Group and is on her third year at the district. She was also featured in STN's Wisdom Profile. So if you guys haven't read that or want to learn more about Jenny, you can jump on to stnonline.com/go/wisdom to learn more there. But I think that kind of covers the introduction. How's everything going, Jenny? How was your Christmas, New Year's, all that good stuff?
Hi, Taylor. Thanks. It's great to be here. We had a really great holiday season and got to see our family and some friends and in the new year. So it was actually pretty great for us.
Great. Yeah, I know you were talking about earlier how there's a snowstorm coming, and here in California, we're cold at 50 degrees.
Yes, and here in Pennsylvania, we're waiting on several inches of snow to reach us.
Oh, man. Well, it's that time of year. It's winter.
Definitely is. And, we've been pretty lucky so far and haven't really had much winter yet. So, January, it's time.
Well, good. So before we jump too much into what's looking for this year, let's do a little 2021 recap. So were there any big initiatives that you guys focused on last year, maybe technology-wise, any alternative fuels?
2021 for us was really kind of, as with everybody, it's a challenge. And our main focus at transportation was moving in the direction of technology. Our building isn't such that we can have a lot of people gathering, so we had to figure out ways to remain connected to each other in other ways. So the staff was really great about figuring out how to use and becoming expert users at things like their emails and Google Forms and Zoom. And so that's what allowed us to maintain our operations and to keep in touch with each other. At that time, we had a big focus on professional development. All of our staff had leadership training. We did professional development sessions pretty much weekly. Most of that, obviously, through Zoom, just like everybody else. Our August in-service was actually a highlight of our 2021 year. We had a week-long in-service and just several really great sessions on things like how trauma is affecting our students, the social emotional learning. We did some live experience with fire extinguishers and seatbelt cutters with the help of our Bethlehem Township volunteer fire department. And we were fortunate enough that we actually staged with our first responders, staged a mock accident. So that was a pretty cool thing and was a great learning experience for what distracted driving could look like. 2021 was a pretty big recruiting and training year for us. We implemented a paid training program that's really helped us recruit a lot more candidates and get them from applicant to certified driver in about 5 to 6 weeks, which is pretty typical if you're aggressive about it. And we initiated a partnership with Bus Patrol that we are still finalizing, but our stop arm enforcement technology has been installed on all of our buses. So it's a pretty exciting thing that we're looking to get moving later this month.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
It's a pretty big milestone. And, stop arm violations are a big deal in a lot of places, and we're figuring out just how much of a problem it is here in our area as well.
Mm-hmm. And I know when we were kind of talking last year, now we can say last year, you kind of mentioned that you're not necessarily in a driver's shortage per se, but all of a sudden illnesses or quarantines happen and then you're short drivers. Is that kind of still the case?
That is the case. And just like everyone else, we're being hit a little harder right after the break and everything. So between our COVID absences and our long-term illnesses and leaves of absences, I mean, we're still getting the job done. It's an any given day problem. It's not for us. It's not necessarily we know that we've got 2 weeks of not being able to run a route. That's not our fate right now, which is fortunate for us. But, on any given day, we might have 1 or 2 routes that aren't covered.
Mm-hmm. So what do you just do in those situations?
We send out notices to the schools and to the parents that says this route is not going to be running. However, we can still get them to school. We just don't get them to school on time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I'm sure with the weather too, that's kind of complicating things a little bit.
Yeah, we've spent the last couple of days coming up with variations of an emergency plan of what a small emergency for us would look like up until, what if 20% of our department found itself absent? So that's been a big chunk of the last couple of days.
Okay. Yeah, I bet. So, what kind of stood out to me last time we talked too was that you guys have been running routes the entire year for 2021. And I think the only week you had off was that Christmas to New Year's week of you took a break. So what happened? Obviously you probably had a robust summer school, but what did that kind of look like?
It was a big challenge for us because, we hit the ground running in January of 2021 and, our regular school startups here in Pennsylvania, we are required to transport our charter schools and our private schools and parochial schools. And we have to transport students within our district up to 10 miles beyond our district borders. So even though our district has 22 schools, there are up to around 50 other schools that we're transporting for, most of them within our district borders, but several of them outside of that. So when you have different bell times and different school start times, and these schools have these days off, which may or may not coincide with the days that the district has off, we're pretty much transporting students every single day. Then summer comes along and we've got different days of last day of school, and we have different days of what does summer school look like in our community. And yeah, we had a lot more summer programs than we've had in previous years. And that took us all the way between the regular summer school and the ramp up for the next school year. That took us into the middle of August, where some of our non-district schools are now doing school startup. So we go right from spring to summer to fall all the way through December. And, everybody was grateful for the week that they had for some downtime.
I'm sure it was a lot of laying around, relaxing, and not wanting to drive during that time.
Probably not. I can imagine if they're anything like me, that they were just intentionally doing very little.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Well, yeah, that's crazy. I mean, you told me that and I was like, whoa, I don't know if any other districts experienced something similar to that, but that's pretty crazy that you're able to say, yeah, we transported kids every single week except for one last year.
51 of 52, that is for sure.
Awesome. Well, now switching gears and looking at the new year, are there any things that will carry over, either from COVID-19 and the cleaning protocols that were in place there, and then some of the operational changes that you guys did in 2021? Is any of that going to carry over into this year?
Pretty much all of that carries over into this year, and we continue to focus on data-driven decisions and our focus on technology. In fact, at the end of January, all of our buses are having tablets installed, with the goal being to make the buses a rolling workstation for our drivers and our monitors. The ability to clock in and clock out from the bus, to be able to have turn-by-turn navigation, that kind of thing, all of the tools that the drivers and monitors need in order to do their jobs, not just well, but to excel at them. We have a technology plan going into the next couple of years whereby our wish list items include things like student attendance tracking and a parent app and those kinds of things. So we're very much looking into providing readily and easily available tools to the staff members that need to use them on a regular basis. In addition to that, the constant recruiting and training, that is no different than any other student transportation operation across the country. We've been very successful with our paid training program and have had right around 20-ish newly certified drivers since the beginning of this school year. Obviously, with attrition and retirements and things like that, I wish I could say that put us up 20 drivers, but it didn't. But we're slowly gaining ground, and we've established a process that we've proved that absolutely works. I've got a handful of driver trainers that are on our staff and ready for the MAP 21 compliance and regulations. They've spent the last couple of months researching and making themselves aware of the requirements, tweaking the curriculum a little bit to make sure that we're hitting all of the things that we need to hit, and training themselves on what the documentation process looks like. So we're completely ready for that.
Yeah, you jumped ahead. That was one of my next questions, was kind of talking about that. But that's good to hear that you guys are looking ahead and you're ready for that February 7th compliance date for the entry-level driver training requirements. I mean, what would be your advice to maybe a district who's kind of worried about meeting that compliance date, or, is unsure of how to proceed?
I would say that there are a lot of resources available out there, and there are several groups that have put together some pretty comprehensive information that is very easily understood. And you don't necessarily have to try to get your information directly from the FMCSA website. If someone else has kind of summarized it, that's what helped us. That just knowing that, okay, this is the requirement, this is what you need to do, this is the documentation process with all of the legalese and the statutes that go with that. And that has helped us out a lot. So, just having it broken down into much smaller pieces and knowing where to find that was very helpful for us.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of it, too, is just documenting. That's kind of what this big new change for the ELDT is. It's just documenting everything.
But the great part about that is that there are a lot of places, probably most places, that were already good at the documentation process. They just didn't realize that this is part of what they were going to need to have. So many districts across the country already have great practices and policies already in place. They just needed to realize that that now applies to the MAP 21 rules. Not that they had to necessarily change anything. They just had to take what they do well and make sure that they have it.
Yes, exactly. So jumping back, a little bit to the technology, and you guys are getting tablets, what kind of training goes along with that? And what kind of training are you guys focusing on, directly for this year?
The tablet training is going to be a challenge because of the size of our staff. We've got right at 100 drivers between our regular drivers and our standby drivers. And in previous years, you'd get everybody into one room or small group sessions and, just have somebody on site there that says, okay, this is what this is and this is how to use it and this is what it could do for you. But obviously we're finding that in-person instruction and in-person training is difficult not only for us to do, it's a huge challenge for our vendors as well, that, the travel and being on site and, COVID has changed everything, hasn't it? So what we're going to do is do this in smaller pieces. What I'm not going to do is install the tablets on the buses and say, great, here you go. Here's your date to start using them. Just because they're there doesn't mean that you are required to use them. Can you play around with them? Sure, it's not going to hurt anything. But we take and kind of go from a top-down to approach where our office staff gets trained first, and then we can then train our driver trainers, and then they can take small groups of people and train them and have questions asked of them. And so we establish super users over the course of time so that eventually everybody gets it. And so it will probably be the beginning of next school year before we go to a process that says, okay, these are the tools that you have and you've been trained on them and now you're expected to use them. That we use, January through June to get good at what we do and then mandate the usage of it.
I like that. So there's a little flexibility and drivers don't feel like, on Monday or whatever, they have to get on the bus and know exactly what they're doing and how to use it.
That's correct, because we know that we've thrown a lot at our drivers and monitors over the last year, and we've really inundated and overwhelmed them with, you have to do this and you have to clean that and you can't be in the building, and how do you communicate with the people that you need to communicate with? How do you get to your supervisor? How do you ask somebody about your weekly hours? And all of those things, even how to fill out a bus conduct report, which we've taken a paper-based system and moved it to a digital system. And you've got early adopters of that, and you've got people that are still not great at it. But the one thing that I'm very proud of the staff for is that every single person is at least trying. They've got different skill levels, but they all know what the expectation is. And even if they have to ask a colleague or ask an office staff member for assistance, it's not a problem. Because you show somebody how to do something once and maybe twice, and by the third time they kind of know how to do it on their own, but maybe they just want a confirmation that they're on the right track, and eventually they get to be independent users. And that's what's happened over the course of the last year. But it was not easy for them because it all had to happen practically overnight.
Exactly. Like COVID shut down all the schools and it's like, okay, you need to learn how to use your email like right now.
Mm-hmm. But we've gone from a department where, maybe a very small percentage of our members checked their email or even know that they have a district email account to 100% usage. And that wasn't by design, that was by force.
Right.
But they're all working at it, and they all know that this is I do not like the term new normal, but this is our new normal.
Yeah, I've been hearing that phrase a lot more frequently now. So it's probably here to stay.
I would imagine, and it'll become one of those terms that every time that you hear it, you just cringe.
Right, because you remember back to pre-COVID times. Oh.
Well, I think that, you kind of hit the nail on the head where There are a lot of us in our office, and I can't imagine that we're different than anybody else, but we feel like we've lost a year, like it just didn't exist. And, you have conversations of, did we do this back in 2020 or was this 2019? No, Jenny, that was 2021. Really?
Yeah, it's time is all just becoming like one big mush in our brains now. That's how I feel, at least.
I completely agree with you.
So without jinxing too much, California is definitely spiking again, and we're kind of seeing a little bit more of that ramp up of COVID-19 coming back. Do you guys see that impacting your district at all, or shifting some of the procedures a little? I know school districts are doing online for a couple weeks coming out of the winter break.
Our district has been in person 5 days a week since the beginning of the school year. Last school year, we started and finished under a hybrid model so that students were in class at least 2 days a week. And the district leadership firmly believes that the school campuses are the best place for students to be, and we support that. Is there an increase in cases in our area? You bet there is. The next 2 to 3 weeks are going to be very challenging, not just for transportation, but for the school sites. And, kind of across the board in this area, there are a lot of places that are seeing up to about a 20% absence rate. So, we're in an area where cases are numerous, but everybody's getting through that. And the district's commitment to keeping students in person as much as possible, transportation supports that.
Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of sums up and wraps up our interview there. Just keeping kids in person, safely transporting them to school. That is what transportation is about. And I'm sure that's going to continue this year and for years and years to come.
Absolutely. Because, we are very much an integral part of the overall education experience. And each person does this job for their own reasons, but the collective belief is that, we're here to support our community and to support our students. And this is the part that we play in it.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Jenny, for coming on and sharing your insight with us. And I wish you and Bethlehem Area Schools a very prosperous 2022. I'm sending good vibes everywhere, guys. Sending good vibes.
Thanks, Taylor. We really appreciate it.
All right, guys, this episode's a wrap. Want to thank TransFinder again for sponsoring our episode today. Thank you to Ryan. Thank you to Taylor, Jenny. We appreciate you guys being on here, talking to us about everything happening in the school transportation industry. Guys, don't forget, register TSD Conference, Transporting Students with Disabilities and Special Needs. It is the top of special needs training. If you operate a system with special needs children, this is a must attend for anyone in your operation. Make sure you save that $150 with our super early bird. It ends on the 14th of January. That is Friday, coming up fast. So go to tsdconference.com for all that information. Don't forget, tell your friends about the podcast. Spread the word, stnpodcast.com. We're also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else you listen to podcasts. Thanks, Nation. We appreciate you listening. Happy New Year. We love you.